hearing from the candidates tonight
This meeting
will help
is
you
being
decide
recorded.
who you want to be the next district attorney and sheriff of Suffolk County. Sorry. The primary election will take place on Tuesday, September 6th, the day after Labor Day. This forum is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. We ask the audience to be respectful when posting in chat. Please do not engage in any harassing, discriminatory, and intimidating behavior that stifles debate and constructive dialogue. Since 2009, JPP has been working to build a progressive voice in our community and organize for change in Boston, Massachusetts, and nationwide. We conduct candidate forums and organize to support progressive candidates at all levels of government, from city council to president. In addition, we hold educational forums and advocate for progressive change in our state on issues such as criminal justice reform, equitable education, safe communities for immigrants, progressive revenue, and transparency in government. We are the clipboard holders, door knockers, and question askers for progressive values in our community. This year, we need you to come out and volunteer like it's 2018 when we helped elect Ayanna Pressley to Congress, Rachel Rollins to District Attorney, and Nika Alvarado to State Representative. JPP is hosting Sunday 3 p.m. canvases for Nika for Senate, Sam for State Rep, and Thursday night phone banks for Tanisha for Secretary of State, and we'll be adding more opportunities as we endorse more candidates. Please find time this summer to volunteer for all the extraordinary candidates that you have endorsed. We win when we organize. In addition to volunteering for the candidates you endorsed, we also need you to knock doors for the Fair Share Amendment, which will be on the ballot on November 8th. This amendment is a matter of economic justice. It will make the very rich pay their fair share of taxes, and the money will be used to improve our transportation system and fund public education. We will be posting volunteer sign-up links in the chat. Tonight's moderators are JPP's own Ziba Kramer for District Attorney section and Melissa Beltran for the Sheriff section. Ziba?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Annie. So the agenda for tonight is that each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement, and then we have a series of open-ended questions where each candidate will get 90 seconds to respond. We will then have, if someone is named, then they get the person who is named gets 30 seconds to respond. And we are going to then have a 1-minute closing, a lightning round will follow. We have 5 minutes for lightning rounds, which is essentially a yes, no. And the candidates will see on the reaction screen that when we ask the questions, you can either choose yes, or you can choose no. And you might want to test that for a sec here. And then you actually have to lower the reaction for it to disappear. So we'll do that for 5 minutes until we run out of questions or we run out of time. And then we'll have 1 minute close for each of you. In that closing statement, you'll also be able to address any nuances that you may want to expand upon from the yes and no questions. So that is the plan. And we are going to actually start with Councilor Arroyo. And Cindy, can you put up the 2 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the JP Progressives for doing this, and thank you for everybody who's here. Before I became a city councilor, I was a public defender. I represented hundreds of individuals in our courts, both Suffolk and Essex County, in Superior and in district courts. And in that time frame, I was able to see the arbitrary nature of justice. The reality is that far too many people before the courts are not seeing justice. They're seeing disparity. Whether that's based on race or class or their issues with mental illness or substance use disorder, and they are not receiving outcomes that actually benefit community. And so that actually drove me to the city council, because I believe that we needed systemic change, that this could only be addressed in a systemic way. And so I ran for the city council and I won. And my very first thing I did was racism as a public health crisis, based on, in large part, on the racism that I saw exhibited in our judicial system every day. When Rachel Rollins stepped down to become our U.S. attorney, and we had a new appointment, it was very clear that the direction that Rachel Rollins was taking us, a direction where we centered racial injustice, where we centered class injustice, and we worked through policy, through written policy, like things like the do not charge list, which I helped write, that had been proven to work, were being taken down and dismantled by my opponent, even though they'd been proven to work. I knew that this was an urgent race for justice. This was an urgent race for what we wanted to do and continue to do with our systems. I think it's incredibly important that we have a district attorney who is open and honest about the failings of our legal and judicial system, and is open and ready to take part in any reforms that move that needle forward, and that those reforms be written and dictated in a way where we can be held accountable to them. And so that is why I'm running, to ensure that we create a more just criminal legal system while reducing crime through policy and through action. Thank you.
Thank you. DA Hayden, over to you.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Good to see this entire group here. I can see the clock now. My name is Kevin Hayden. I'm a junior district attorney, and I'm running because I believe that Suffolk County needs and deserves an experienced leader, someone who understands that public safety and criminal legal reform are not mutually exclusive. Someone who understands that both are wanted and needed by all of our communities, and that both can be achieved in a way that is done without bias or prejudice and can be done with fairness and equity. I spent my entire 25 years in the criminal legal system, over 11 years in the district attorney's office, over 5 years as a criminal defense attorney, and 8 years running the Sex Offender Registry Board, another state agency, before I came to the DA's office. I've always been content being behind the scenes as a leader, but when the governor asked me if I would fill Rachel Rollins' seat, I knew in my spirit that I was called and prepared for this moment. You know, my dad, Bob Hayden, inspired me to public service. He was an assistant superintendent of Boston Public Schools. He was a leader in the NAACP and a preeminent historian here in Boston. And his great legacy was passed on to me. He unfortunately passed away about 2 weeks after my appointment. I've experienced this legal system in every possible way. As a Black man who's been discriminated against, as a husband of a Caribbean immigrant, the father of 2 boys, 2 teenage boys, fighting to keep our neighborhood safe as a prosecutor, and as a defense attorney who's represented so many clients in need who've obviously been failed by the system. I'm not a politician, but I'm built to be your DA. I practice in every courtroom, from the smallest district court all the way up to the Supreme Judicial Court. And in the short months that I've been here, I've already achieved some incredible results, from our Boston First initiative to tackle trafficking and unsolved shootings, to services over sentences that addresses our opioid crisis at Mass and Cass, and a number of other things as well. To ensure public safety, and make no mistake, we will do just that, while also carrying on with criminal legal reform. We will engage in some strategies that we need to rededicate ourselves to. One is intervention and prevention with our community-based organizations in ways we never have before. The second is continued criminal legal reform through alternatives to prosecution. And last is a rededication to our returning citizens coming back into our community so that they can be the greatest example of restorative justice that we've ever seen. I'll leave it at that. I know we got questions, and then I can wrap up some more with.
Great. So one other housekeeping item, we'll give you 5 seconds to go over, and then we will hit the mute button. We have about a little under 20 minutes right now, so it'll probably get to 3 or 4 questions. We'll just keep going until we run out of time. So the first question, and DA Hayden, this is for you, is, what are the outcomes that you're seeking as district attorney from that office? And if you were to sort of describe your metrics dashboard, what would be on that dashboard that would show how you're measuring progress towards those outcomes? So we're looking really for your vision and how you're measuring success. Oh, you're still muted. Here you go. There you go.
Sorry, I muted myself there. Very, very broadly speaking, I think the most important metric we would look at is how the intervention and prevention strategies that we employ hopefully reduces that pipeline into our system to begin with. I know from experience and having done it, and I know that we've gotten away from it since I've gotten back to the office, that intervention and prevention strategies in close collaboration with all our community partners makes a difference. It makes a difference in terms of reducing not just reducing recidivism because cases never happen in the first place. We can worry a lot less about alternatives to prosecution if we do intervention and prevention the right way. So I would be measuring the extent to which our intervention and prevention strategies are actually limiting and stemming the tide of the flow of cases that are coming into our system.
Great. Okay, Councilor Arroyo, over to you.
So the metrics that are incredibly important to me are the charging decisions that are being made. Charging decisions are incredibly important. Those charging decisions can impact a person's ability to vote, a person's ability to find work, a person's ability to find housing, and frankly, depending on the kinds of charges, a person's ability to get federal student loans. And so that actually shuts down pathways to becoming more productive members of society and actually having ways to benefit themselves if you're closing off pathways to do that. And so what I would be very interested in is disparity. I would be looking for whether or not people who have similar backgrounds, but different races or different genders or different economic, socioeconomic status are receiving different sentences and different charging decisions based on the data. I'd also be looking at, there was a recent study by the Boston Globe about traffic stops and the ways in which essentially driving while Black is still criminalized in Suffolk County. And so we would want to be looking at all data, and we would want all that data to be public as to who is coming into contact with our judicial system and our legal system, who is getting charged with what at what rates, so that we can then make decisions on what the long-term determinations of that are. So in other words, if you're being charged in this way, what is the chance, or what are the chances that you're actually coming back into our court system? I'll give you a small example. With the list of 15, they were able to go 15 years back using that data, and they found that first-time offenders that were diverted were actually 64% likely to ever be charged again or with a misdemeanor, and 74% less likely to get a felony. Proof that policies work or aren't working are incredibly important. That kind of data would be on my dashboard.
Great, thank you. So sticking with this general theme, and we're going to come back to you, Councilor Arroyo. How would the office, the DA's office under your leadership, address the many underlying issues that bring individuals into contact with the system? What's your vision for how the office would intersect there? And then DA Hayden, when you go, you can talk about what you've done as well.
You just restate the question for me really quickly. I think I only caught the last half of that. You're muted.
Okay, I just posted it in chat, but it's how would the DA's office under your leadership address the underlying causes that bring folks in contact with the system?
So this is something on the council that I've been a huge proponent of, which is reallocating funding to ensure that we're actually meeting people's needs. I actually believe that people are good fundamentally, and that when people act out antisocially or in criminal ways that we deem criminal, it's largely because some need isn't being met or there's some trauma that's not being met. And so a lot of the time, what I would prefer to see this office do is work on violence interruption, work on ensuring that we're not clogging up our court systems with folks who are dealing with substance use disorder by criminalizing substance use disorder. Often those kinds of charges and that kind of entanglement within our system creates a never-ending cycle of probation that ends up with incarceration or periods of incarceration that often stops or halts all of the progress that those individuals make. And I know that firsthand because I've worked with folks. So I would advocate for ending Section 35s. I think they're incredibly harmful. They, I think, double or triple the level of overdose deaths that we see. So often a Section 35, which is an involuntary hold for addiction, is actually fatal. It's a death sentence. I would make sure that our victim witness advocate unit is being as proactive as possible in people's lives to ensure that they're receiving the resources that they need. In fact, people who have previously needed those resources, I would like to have more of a longer leash with those individuals so that we're not just saying your case is over and so is our time with you. I think in some cases that's not the case, but I would like to formally make that policy so that we follow through with people long-term. I think those are the ways in which the DA's office can do it. But as an advocate with the podium that I have, I would advocate for reallocating resources and funding to the programming that I think works to reduce crime.
Thank you. DA Hayden. You're mute.
I think it's very important for us when we talk about and think about alternatives to prosecution, that we make sure and ensure that we are actually providing real alternatives to prosecution. I understand that requires resources, and that requires us reallocating resources and also finding resources. We did that with our services over sentences program in order to tackle the opioid crisis. We took $450,000 of asset forfeiture money and funneled it right back into treatment programs for people that come into the court system that need treatment, either for mental health disorders or for substance use disorder. But at the end of the day, I think our allocation of resources and our reallocation of resources needs to provide real alternatives when we do not prosecute someone, when we divert a case, when we decline to prosecute a case, and there's always a place for that. We always need to make sure that we're providing real alternatives, whether it's drug treatment, whether it's housing opportunities, whether it's mentorship for young men and women that are coming through the system that may have gone wayward and just need support and need wraparound services. Whatever it may be, we need to be looking at the specific case, looking at the individuals involved and addressing what their needs are when they reach that touch point in our system and provide them real alternatives to prosecution.
Thank you. So, you know, kind of sticking on this same issue, and I think we're going to come back to you. We're going to flip flop who goes first. So DA Hayden, this is coming to you. So what is your approach to reducing over policing, prosecution, and the impacts on Black and Brown communities? How does your vision for decriminalization, diversion programs, restorative justice programs fit into this and other interventions? And if you could be as specific as possible, that would be great.
Sure. I think that all of those things play into reducing over policing. But I think simply community engagement and collaboration is just so important. It's what I've done and staked my entire career on. It's what me and the new police commissioner, or the one who was announced today, and Mr. Cox, who I've known for many years, talked about, where we serve our communities by really getting deeply involved in everything they're doing and getting involved in intervention and prevention strategies that are driven by our communities, that are determined and driven and directed by deep collaboration with our communities. That takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time, but it absolutely can be done. We've done it before, and we can do it again. It's also a matter of our office and the police department looking like the communities we serve, from the top down, from the leadership down, and being committed to diversity, equity, inclusion within our own organizations, and taking that all the way to the people, to the communities, and representing them in a holistic way. Restorative justice and all the other things you mentioned in the question are all a part of it. But again, I'm hearkening back again to those intervention and prevention strategies and working with our communities and with our community stakeholders that I think really makes a difference.
Thank you. Councilor Roy, before we come to you, I'm actually want to come back to you, DA Hayden, and we'll give you extra time, Councilor. Can you be very specific about, you know, what diversion programs you support? What is it, pre-arraignment, post-arraignment? You know, very specific about the different programs or interventions, you know, at the point of after the pre-interventions, we'll call them.
Sure. There, in terms of diversion, I think there's room for the full diaspora. So some people may have their case diverted before they're arraigned. Some may not. Some may be looking at a pretrial probation sort of term or condition. It varies, and that extent to which it varies needs to be determined based upon the case, based upon the charges, but most importantly, based upon the person involved. And when I say the person involved, I mean a focus on what that person needs. Once we know what that person needs, once we know what happened to bring that person into a touch point into our system in the first place, then we can decide what's appropriate, what to do, what alternatives to prosecution are possible. In some of those scenarios, that may mean prolonging the arraignment. That may mean saying, well, we're not even going to arraign you today because we need time to look at X, Y, and Z before we determine what we're going to do in terms of diversion. So it really can vary, and it should vary on a case-by-case basis based upon the need of the person. But the entire diaspora, I believe, is available in terms of diversionary practices.
Okay, Counselor Roy, we didn't get that number up, but I think we'll give you 2 minutes if that's all right. Same question.
Thank you. So I got a fire truck going by. 1 second.
Okay.
All right. So just to answer this as succinctly as I can, there are real points of difference here between me and Kevin Hayden. One of the very first things that I think you can do to stop racial profiling is end the gang database. And I'm a proponent for that. My opponent is not. Just recently, literally this week, Commonwealth v. Vega was decided, or Vega v. Commonwealth rather, by the Supreme Judicial Court here in Massachusetts, where they again seconded the opinion of the federal appellate court that the gang database is unreliable. What the gang database does is it classifies people. People hear the gang database and they think that it's a crime prevention or a crime fighting tool. It's not. What it is a classification tool. And it's a classification tool that makes you guilty based on the neighborhood that you live in. And in fact, that gang database, which is several thousand of people, 7,000 people, and is for life, is also like 97% people of color. And so there are some real issues there with what that does. And so folks who don't understand how you get on there, it's by FIOs. It means that you're being observed doing non-criminal activity, like playing basketball with friends, wearing certain clothing, and you're getting points for that. And so I think that system is both got real constitutional flaws, but also just promotes racial profiling and it makes people suspects for the neighborhoods in which they live. I think it has no place. The other thing I would say is we can look back. The impact of racial profiling has been felt for a very long time. The Integrity Review Bureau, where my opponent has actually demoted the person who was there, David Lewis, under Rachel Rollins, who was responsible for 9 different exonerations for a collective 450 years of time served. You had 9 people in every single one of those cases. They found police misconduct or prosecutorial misconduct. Nobody was held accountable for that, neither an officer nor a prosecutor. And so in that case, I would create an accountability unit to make sure that when we are finding prosecutors and officers who are racially profiling or harming individuals, that they're held accountable for that. So those are 2 substantive ways. I could give you more, but I see that I got a second rather.
You were mentioned, DA Hayden, so we will give you another 30 seconds to respond. If you want to.
Sure. I just briefly, I respond in a couple ways. Yes, the Integrity Review Board is something that our office remains steadfastly committed to. The importance of it and the importance that it does in ensuring appropriate sentences and the appropriate convictions in cases is vitally, vitally important, and the overturning of them when it's appropriate. In our Integrity Review Board, we promoted someone as well. So we still have a head of the Integrity Review Board. We're still committed to the Integrity Review Board and to everything that it does. And as the only
Great, thank you. So we're gonna move on. I've changed the order a bit. I think, Councilor O'Rourke, you're going first this time? Yeah, so the next question, we have a lot of folks in our community that are very active on immigrant rights issues. It's an issue that a lot of people care about. And we'd like to understand what policies or protocols will you implement or are you implementing to ensure that community members are not deported for old criminal convictions that have been served or other issues that are unrelated to their status.
Absolutely. And so I got recent coverage in a endorsement by the Mi Gente National Organization because I'd like to bring a crimmigration unit to the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. In fact, I've already had conversations with folks who I would like to fill it. For people who don't know, there are collateral consequences, even for people who are here on green card status for some charges that wouldn't even lead to jail time, frankly. Things like continuance without a finding, which are deferred dismissals, can get somebody deported. And so that knowledge was often something that I experienced in Essex County. District attorneys and ADAs did not share, and in fact, did not care about whether or not they were doing injustice in a case because somebody with some petty nonviolent charge was going to get deported to a country that they'd never been to. And so having a department or something in the office where people are being educated on collateral consequences, where they're being taught ways in which you can still achieve the outcome that you are seeking, whether that be probation or whether that be diversion, without necessarily charging somebody or putting somebody in a position where they are being deported. And so that's one way. The second way is we won't communicate with ICE. One of the things I've done on the city council is I passed the surveillance oversight ordinance which included language in it to ensure that people in BPS, students in BPS were not being having their cases referred over to ICE, which had happened. That was happening. We had somebody deported, in fact, on that faulty gang database I mentioned. And so creating communication sort of blocks where they're not getting information from us regarding deportations and where we're actually looking towards, in a proactive way, how to protect immigrants in our city.
Thank you. DA Hayden.
I'm mute there. Apologize. So I think there are several things that come to bear here. I mean, but Boston is a sanctuary city, and that's very important to all of us. And I think we always need to be mindful of people's immigration statuses. And so we want our courthouses and where we're conducting business in court to always be safe from ICE immigration as well. But more importantly than that, this is something that I intend to talk to the head of CPCS, Anthony Benedetti, when I meet with him next week. Is we need to really look at collateral consequences. We need to look at CORI reform, and we need to make sure that both sides of our criminal justice system, meaning our prosecutors and our defense attorneys, understand CORI and understand collateral consequences. When I was doing criminal defense work, I had to represent a man who was being deported based upon an old drug offense. And I had to go back into court with him and ask the court to revise and revoke his sentence on a small misdemeanor drug offense so that he could avoid deportation. And that was a long, drawn out and very stressful process for him. That shouldn't have happened. Those things can happen, one, by understanding what the collateral consequences are to charges in the first place, so that we don't have to get to that point. But then second, what we really need CORI reform. We need to understand that our CORI reform needs to happen, and that will go a long way in addressing these issues.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that is.
Can I just touch on that really quickly? And if he wants to rebut, that's fine, but can I just touch on it really quickly?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that was just highlighted by the fact that we need to have a meeting with Anthony Benedetti, the head of the Committee for Public Counsel Services, to figure out how to teach and train ADAs on collateral consequences is exactly why something like a do not charge list is incredibly important. A do not charge list was actually a rebuttable presumption list, which meant 1 in 4 people were charged, but it required people who wanted to charge somebody to go to a supervising chief of that district court and explain why it was appropriate in that instance, where that chief could then explain to them the collateral consequences. It's a protection. When you have a court system that's just, basically willy-nilly, there's no policy in place for that, then you're going to end up with people who don't understand collateral consequences, as District Attorney Hayden just made clear is the case, and don't have full training on that, making those decisions in ways that are harmful for individuals. And I just want to highlight that is why those kinds of things are important.
Go ahead, DA Hayden.
Sure. My only response to that very briefly would be is that we're really talking about two different things here. And we can always improve, and we can always do better. And I think that it's fair to say that a cross training for both defense attorneys and prosecutors, understanding collateral consequences, and more importantly, understanding what CORI is, how CORI impacts those collateral consequences. It is, and that's where CORI reform comes in, because if it's simplified, then it's easier to understand. But there's so many people that still don't understand it. It's very complex. I think some people, even within the CORI system itself, sometimes don't understand it, and that's why some errors get made sometimes with regards to what gets released to people. But I don't think there's any problem or any reason why we shouldn't be willing to look very closely at working together collaboratively with our defense bar on really understanding collateral consequences and CORI reform.
Okay, I have one last general question, and then we'll go to the yes and no's. And this one is about, I think there's been a lot of discussion about the crimes that the do not prosecute list from DA Rollins, DA Hayden. I think I heard you in earlier say that it would really be a case-by-case basis. Councilor Arroyo, I think I've heard you say that you would maybe expand in other forums that list. It seems to me it represents a real area of difference, and I'd love you to both expand on your approach to some of these low-level crimes and the impact that has of bringing people into the system and your approach to that. And I cannot remember who went last. Do you guys remember? So I think that would be, I think it was DA Hayden, right?
I think so.
Okay.
I think I answered that last one first, actually.
Yeah. So I think DA Hayden, you're next, right?
Oh, okay. I'm
Yeah.
next. So, look, the list of 15 cases that was used by Rachel Rollins is the same list of 15 cases of lower level offenses that was used by Dan Conley and other prosecutors. It's the same list of lower level offenses that are appropriate for diversion, appropriate for being null-prossed under certain circumstances, appropriate for alternatives to prosecution. We will absolutely continue to use those cases and those specific charges in order to determine what's appropriate for the diversion alternatives to prosecution. The difference is that we'll make that decision on a case-by-case basis based upon the people that are involved in the cases. And that would be the person that's accused, but also victims and witnesses. We need to remember that we have a community that is affected by crimes. We need to remember that we have victims that are affected by crimes. And look at these cases on a case-by-case basis, looking at the people involved to determine what the appropriate resolution is. So in some cases, if the community and victims are willing, then even for lower level cases, we can use a restorative justice model to address the case. If there's treatment that's needed, then that's what we need to address. But I would say this, and this has been my continued point. We right now are intensely and keenly focused on diversion and alternatives to prosecution, which is one aspect of a holistic approach to our criminal legal system. If we don't start to look at the whole spectrum of criminal legal reform and the whole spectrum of how we handle our criminal legal system, we will fail. We need to look at intervention and prevention.
Sorry, DA Hayden. We're gonna go over to Councilor Arroyo now.
Thank you. And with all due respect to my opponent about looking at the whole spectrum of criminal justice reform, I haven't heard him put forward anything to address inequities, racial or class. I've only seen him so far state that he won't follow the one policy that everybody knows that was put in place by Rachel Rollins and has been proven to work, that had a causal impact on reducing crime. And so the issue here, just for people who might not understand, is that the implication that we weren't looking at case by case, person by person is false. That's not how this worked. The case didn't come in and there was a police report and they just looked at the charge. The way this looked is they looked at each individual case, and then you had to make a case if you thought that it deserved prosecution. The way it works now is that any person sitting at a frontline ADA desk can make that determination on their own, which often takes the youngest attorneys, many of whom don't represent. Frankly, we have a stark difference in what Suffolk County looks like and what our district attorney's office looks like. Many who do not have those cultural sensitivities, those cultural understandings, don't have any understanding, in some cases, as the district attorney said, of collateral consequences making those decisions. And so what we're talking about is something that is put in place to protect communities and that actually reduces crime. And so that's what the difference with the list is. And I'll just say one of my biggest issues with this by my opponent is that he put forward a restorative justice program that was slammed by community organizations and by the public defender's office. And that has a list of charges that preclude you from involvement. So in those instances, it's okay to use charges to preclude you from restorative justice. But when it comes to making sure that we don't tag up people's records and put them in harm's way, we can't use a list of charges for the same thing. And just for the record, Dan Conley had no list. This is the first list of its kind. I know because I was there.
Okay, I think we'll give you 15 seconds to respond. So we keep moving, and then we'll keep going. You're on mute though. There you go.
I was there when Dan Conley was there, so I know what list of offenses he looked at. I also, with all due respect to Councilor Arroyo, haven't seen your name on a transition committee or a file or anything with regards to the creation of this list of 15 cases that you claim to have been a part of.
Okay, Councilor Arroyo, you were named, so you can go ahead.
Thank you. You might want to look at the Boston Globe article by Marcela Garcia, where Rachel Rollins is quoted as saying, I was one of the most influential people on her policy. I'll take that over a transition committee. But the second part of that is Dan Conley has no such list. There was no list. You might have looked at charges, but there's no list. There's no policy. And if you're stating that there was a policy of do not charging these lists, if that's what you're stating, then I'd like you to say that. Otherwise, you're obfuscating.
Okay, so we're gonna now move to the yes and no. You guys will have a chance in the final statements to address any further discussion on these topics and just to draw out the differences. But what we've done is we've taken a list of state legislative proposals in the state legislature. We understand that these are not things that you have control over, or that that you could implement yourselves, or some of them you might be able to, but we want to understand your perspective on these issues and whether you would stand up, and just as a way to get a sense of your philosophical sort of belief system around these issues. So I'm going to ask a bunch of yes and no questions. We'll just keep going until 44, because we're a little bit behind. And so if you want to test out your reactions, yes, no, I'll repeat each of your responses and we'll move on, just so it's verbal and visual. So the first is, would you support ending cash bail? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. You want to use that? All right. If you want to say it verbally, that's fine.
I
Would you?
don't see the-
I'm trying, I can't see how to,
Oh, you don't see them?
I see it, I just don't-
There's a little check in a little red if you go
Yeah.
to the options. Yes, I see it.
I don't see how to check it, but I'll try
Okay.
again.
It's not such a big deal if you don't want to use. Okay. And you actually have to lower it. So maybe we'll just stick with verbal rather than, do tech help stuff. Okay. So ending cash bail. Yes. And sorry, DA Hayden, what was your response on that? Was yes as well?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Increasing the age at which someone is charged in juvenile court.
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Opposing the proposal to expand, this is a double negative. So do you oppose the proposal to expand the state's wiretapping statute? So
Yeah.
yeah.
No.
Okay. Do you support repealing life without parole sentences?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do you support banning no-knock warrants?
Yes.
No.
Okay. Do you support repealing mandatory minimums?
Yes.
No.
Okay. Do you support the Safe Communities Act?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do you support eliminating qualified immunity for law enforcement?
Absolutely.
No.
Okay. Do you support banning the use of facial surveillance technology by law enforcement?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do you accept donations, or will you accept donations from law enforcement unions, not individuals, unions?
No.
No.
If I can just interject, Kevin Hayden has accepted state police union money.
Okay. You
I
can
don't
address that in the closing, sorry. Do you support expunging all past nonviolent cannabis offenses?
Expunging all nonviolent cannabis offenses?
Yes.
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 Okay. Do you support a prison and jail construction moratorium?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you support eliminating technical revocations of parole?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do you, okay. Do you support opposing an expansion of the state's pretrial detention statute?
Yes.
Yes.
That's one of those complicated ones. Okay. Do you support broadening prosecutors' post-conviction powers to redress unjust convictions in extreme sentencing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Great. So we'll summarize that later because that was fast. And now we're gonna turn it over to closing statements. And I believe Councilor Arroyo went first. So DA Hayden, we'll start with you and close with Councilor Arroyo, and you have 1 minute for your close.
Thank you. So I'll just conclude by addressing a point that I was making earlier, and that is that it's our whole spectrum of our criminal legal system that we need to focus on and pay attention to. So we need to focus and rededicate ourselves to intervention and prevention strategies with our community groups. And we need to continue in diversion and alternatives to prosecution. And we need to focus on our returning citizens. Returning citizens coming back into our communities whole and with opportunity and access to opportunity and the success that comes from that is the greatest form of restorative justice that we can ever do. It is the full spectrum of our criminal legal system and of criminal legal reform that we need to look at to really make a difference in our cities. Yeah.
Thank you, DA Hayden. Councillor Arroyo.
Thank you. And so I think the differences are really clear here between me and my opponent. There are real differences here. And I think there's a lot at stake here. There are individuals in this city and communities in this city that have seen more injustice than justice. And the only way we're going to actually get to that is if we name that and we address it through written policy and procedures. We can't go back to a time where we didn't have policy. We can't go backwards. We can't go back to what was done in the past because we know what that has done is given us massive disparity and massive injustice. And so I'm running because this matters. This matters for me. This matters for people in my communities. This matters for people that I love. When and how people are charged, when and how people are treated by our court system and by our legal system has an impact that can go generations and families. It's incredibly important that when we do this work, it's intentional, that it's focused, that it is policy written and derived, and that we are looking at data and doing what we would call evidence-based practices. And I think that at stake in this race is some very clear differences in how we approach justice and what justice means to the two of us and how we would achieve those goals. And so I submit that the way that I look at this is we have moved more in the last 3 years than we have in the entirety of my life under Rachel Rollins. And I refuse to go back to a time where we don't do and continue the policies that we're doing. I want to build on that.
Thank you, Councillor Arroyo. Sorry about that. Okay, so thank you both so much for engaging in this short but informative conversation with us. For those of you who are online who have additional questions, there's a number of other forums. The Ward 4 and 5 has one posted where they go a lot deeper. Unfortunately, we have a limited time tonight, but we really appreciate you both taking the time to come and speaking with the community. This is a really important decision, and we appreciate you joining us. And thank you all in the audience. We are going to now switch over to the Suffolk County Sheriff's conversation. Yeah. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Beltran. Thank you
for
both.
having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ziba. Alrighty, so each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement followed by questions with 90-second responses, a lightning round, and a 1-minute closing statement. If a candidate names their opponent, the person named will receive an additional 30-second response time. We will begin with Sandy for her opening statement and then Steve. Thank you for being with us here tonight. Oh, are we still waiting for them? I'm sorry. Did I get ahead of myself?
I'm trying to find everybody to spotlight them.
That's fine.
Sandy, I think we need to show your video so we can spotlight you.
And I think the same goes for the sheriff, who I can't seem to get an eye on.
I don't.
She needs permission. She needs to be made co-host.
She should be co-host now.
Okay, got it. Now I'm all set. I'm here.
Okay, and is the sheriff here somewhere?
Can... Okay.
Who wants to?
You want me to
we
start?
can raise a hand, or hang on. I'm still trying to find Sheriff Tompkins. Here we go. So I see him, I see his phone number, I believe. Sheriff, if you're there, I've just asked you to unmute so I can check and see if it's you.
And while we are working through our technical difficulties, I want to acknowledge Mayor Kim Janey is with us also this evening.
Hello. Hello.
All right, there you are.
Hello,
Are
can you
you
hear
going
me?
to be able to be? Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes, yes, I can hear you. Unfortunately, I had to dial in. I couldn't get on through the Zoom link. This is the only way I could
Okay.
reach you. I'm so sorry.
Okay, so we will not have video of you then, but we can hear you pretty clearly. So that, we'll take it.
Thank you.
I can read that over again, Krista or
Yeah,
Annie.
go ahead. Go ahead, Melissa. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you for joining us. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement followed by questions with 90-second responses, a lightning round, and a 1-minute closing statement. If a candidate names their opponent, the other person named will receive an additional 30-second response time. We will begin with Sandy for her opening statement and then Sheriff Tompkins.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, JP Progressives, for having us this evening and everyone that's watching. My name is Sandy Zamor Khalid, candidate for Suffolk County Sheriff. I first want to say that this was not an easy decision for me to make. For the last 16 years, I've been behind the scenes advocating for others. However, I did not have the authority to fully implement the change that was needed to better serve the population in our care, the community, and the employees at the Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Cabral initially hired me. When I came on, I was hired as a coordinator of community outreach and youth programs, and then moved to director of community outreach and youth programs. And then my last position was the chief of communications and external affairs. In the role as chief, I created programming, acted as liaison to civic and community organizations, and was in the decision-making room as a member of the executive team. I was able to do some incredible work, but ultimately in that structure, I didn't have the power to implement the changes that were needed. Change that would assess the programs that were at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department so we can make sure that they were working. Change that would include focusing on evidence-based programming, not only for the population, but also for academy members. And change that would also leverage our relationships with the public and private sector so that we can address the systemic barriers that make it harder for individuals to reintegrate back into the community. And that is why ultimately I have decided to run for the seat of Suffolk County Sheriff. We need a sheriff that has experience, that has vision, empathy, passion, and integrity. And I know that I will be that sheriff, and I'm hoping that I can earn everyone's support this evening. Thank you.
Sheriff Tompkins, you may give your opening statement.
Oh, good evening, and I apologize that I'm not on Zoom. Thank you, JP Progressives, and thank you to everyone that's tuned in and listening. My name is Steve Tompkins. I'm the Suffolk County Sheriff. I joined the department in 2002 as its Director of Communications. 2005, I was promoted to the Chief of External Affairs, meaning everything outside of the department fell under my purview, but I also kept the communications department. And in 2013, when my predecessor, Andrea Cabral, left to join the cabinet of Governor Deval Patrick, I was tapped as the interim sheriff in 2013, ran in 2014, and then ran again in 2016. When I present in front of people, I like to tell them what our mandate is. And our mandate is care, custody, and control. And when I do this, I like to break down custody. If you look that word up, there's two meanings. The first is imprisonment. The second is guardianship. And that's where my administration leads. At the end of the day, we are our brothers and sisters' keepers. Unfortunately, we have far too many people incarcerated that should be in a mental health facility or substance abuse facility. But due to the scarcity of beds to treat both of those maladies, if someone does something untoward, they're sent to us at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department. On average, men are with us 12 months, ladies are with us 6 months. We have a wide array of programming to assist people, to help them improve their station in life. But we also take a very holistic approach where we don't just deal with the individuals, we deal with the individuals' families. Because in the absence of that familiar care, things could fall backwards. And this is something that we work mightily to address and remedy. It's not an easy job, but we have some extraordinary professionals at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department. We have a full-blown education team, mental health team, substance abuse team, and a wide array of external partners that we deal with to help us do what it is that we have to do. Unfortunately, the recidivism rate in the Commonwealth is 46%. And so we know that people that leave us this Friday potentially will be back in 3 to 6 months. What they need when they leave is 3 things generally: employment.
I'm sorry about that. We just have to move forward with our questions. And before we move forward, I just want to ask, so I'm appropriate, how would you like for me to address you, Sandy? Do you want me to call you Sandy or Miss Calix? I just want to be respectful. I'm sorry, you're muted. Was
My
that
apologies. You can call me Sandy.
Sandy? Great. Thank you. So the first question, and we will start with Sheriff Tompkins. What is the role of the sheriff's office in reducing recidivism among inmates? And what programs have or would you launch, if you were reelected? I'm sorry, Mr. Sheriff Tompkins. Did we lose him? Or I can start with Sandy and then try to come back. Okay, so I can ask that question again, Sandy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry. I think you cut out there for a second, but we can hear you now. I think we're still having some technical difficulty. I'm sorry, Sandy. If he
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Hello,
Yes, we can hear
can you hear
you.
me?
Yes.
Okay. Please ask me the question again, please.
Yes. What is the role of the sheriff's office in reducing recidivism among inmates? And what programs have you launched would you relaunch if elected? And how do you measure success?
Okay, before I go, can you hear me? I just wanna
Yes.
Make sure you can hear me. Okay. The sheriff's role in addressing recidivism basically starts with our youth and making sure that we can interrupt that cycle of criminality. Unfortunately, too many of our youngsters, particularly Black and brown males, almost think it's a rite of passage to go to jail. It's not. And so we work mightily. One of the programs that we have is called the Choice Program, where we send officers into the schools, the middle schools and the high schools, to work with our youth, to let them know that this is not summer camp. This is not a place that you want to be. We follow that up with the Peace Program. The Peace Program is a program that addresses the 18 to 24-year-old cohort. As we all know, the brain doesn't fully mature until you're 25 or 26. And so we have a specific program with a specific academic curriculum to address their needs, meeting them where they're at, and with the intention of helping them increase their station in life, either by going to community college, four-year schools, or getting jobs. We do a lot of work with the unions, and we've had some success with getting some of our guys and ladies into apprenticeships. We have a program called Family Matters. And Family Matters is a holistic program. What we do is we take individuals from the most kind of confrontational, chaotic home fronts, and we work with not only that individual, but we work with the entire family unit. Because in the absence of working with the entire family unit, bad things can happen. We do not want an individual to leave us and go back into a system that is, a household that is challenged. We also work mightily with our ladies. We want to make sure that our ladies, and most of them are there because of domestic violence or muling drugs or guns for their boyfriends or husbands. And so we try to get in front of the ladies to explain that's not the way to go. I'm sorry,
Sheriff. I think we went over time. Thank you. And just a reminder that it is 90 seconds. The timer is on the right side, on the left side of the screen. Sandy, I can ask the question again, or you can go.
I can go.
Great.
We need to do a few things. First of all, we need to address the education level. The education level for 60 to 7% of the population is between 5th and 7th grade. We need to leverage our relationship with the public sector so we can understand why it's so low, so that we don't have to continue to have conversations about second chances. In addition to that, we need to do better implementing evidence-based programming such as CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is proven to work, is known to work, gives people coping mechanisms so they can come back to the community and be successful. In terms of the Family Matters program, that program needs to be expanded. There is a 5-year report that was put out shows that there's only 404 participants participated in that program in the 5 years. And only 237 families received services from that program. So some of the programs at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department need to be evaluated. They need to be inclusive, and we need to make sure that we're helping thousands of people that come through the doors at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department on an annual basis. So how do I judge success? Is by giving individuals in our care and custody and control the opportunities and the resources that they need so they can come back to the community and be successful. And another thing I'd like to do is make sure individuals are issued a mass ID when they come back to the community so that they can apply for resources, or they can apply for employment, or if they're given a stipend, they're able to cash that so that's no longer a systemic barrier. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We are going to start with you, Sandy, for the next question. Last year, there were 5 deaths of inmates in the Suffolk County Jail. What happened and what changes have you made / would you make to ensure this doesn't reoccur?
So thing is, well, I know one change that needs to be made when individual is sectioned, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department is responsible for bringing them to their locations. And I know one of the issues was that an individual was brought to our location and not brought directly to where they were sanctioned. That needs to be looked at. Individuals should not have to go to the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department and wait to be transported to their location. So there's that. We also, once I became sheriff, we need to be more transparent. We need to speak to families, and we need to put more training in place and hold people accountable. And those are some of the things that I would put in place so that we can assure that things are happening in accordance, that families, the community, and everyone's working in unison. And I would also have an advisory board so we can talk about some of the things that are affecting our community and members in our care.
And you did have 40 seconds, Sandy. I didn't know if you wanted to continue or pass it along.
Nope, I'm all set. Thank you.
Great. Sheriff Thompson, you can go. Do you need me to read the question again? Sheriff Tompkins. I'm sorry, just having some IT difficulty. Sheriff Tompkins, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Do you need me to
Okay.
repeat the last question?
Before you ask the question, unfortunately, I'm on my phone. So when Sandy makes her gives her answer, my phone somehow shuts off. So it's going to take me a minute or a second or two to re-engage with you. So I just wanted to let you know that I get muted while she's talking.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Hello?
you for letting us know. Yes.
Okay. Yes, please ask re-ask the question, please.
Yes. Last year, there were 5 deaths of inmates in the Suffolk County Jail. What happened and what changes have you made to ensure that this doesn't reoccur?
So I'm glad you asked that question. We often get people at our facility that show up at our doorstep severely ill. We cannot have the transparencies that my opponent just mentioned because of HIPAA regulations. And what we tell people is, if you have a loved one that has expired in jail, to go to the courts, petition to be that person's representative, and then you can go to the medical examiner that can give you more information. I can't get into chapter and verse as to why these people passed away, but it wasn't because of anything untoward in our facility. They showed up incredibly ill. And just by a confluence of occurrences, coincidental, they all passed away while they were with us. insofar as one individual that was in our facility waiting to be transported. We are the Uber drivers for the courts. We can do nothing about that. And so when people are leaving the courts, we are tapped, all 14 sheriffs, with taking them to wherever they're going when they leave the courts. We had one individual with us who also passed away while waiting for a ride. And so the thing here is, one, to disconnect us from the court system so that we don't have to be the Uber drivers for them. But two, we have a very vibrant medical team. Whenever you come into our facility, you are given a full medical checkup. In certain instances, if Section 35s come into our facility, by law, we cannot give them a medical checkup. By law, that is a statute. And so,
thank you. The next question, we're going to start with you, Sheriff Tompkins. Last year, you suggested utilizing unused areas of the Suffolk County Jail to house those suffering from substance use and homelessness at Mass and Cass. Critics noted that, however well-intentioned, this gave the impression of criminalizing substance use and homelessness rather than handling it with the appropriate compassion and dignity. Discuss the suggestions that was made and what appropriate role the Suffolk County Sheriff can have in assisting at Mass and Cass in the future.
okay, can you hear me? I just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yes.
Hello, you can hear me. Okay. So what happened was this: we weren't trying to criminalize anyone. We had, when a part of Mayor Walsh's Mass and Cass team, we told them that we had a facility that's more like a dormitory than a penal system, and that we could help and house some of those people. We can get them off the street because the winter was coming, and we did not want to see people die, continuing to pass away on our doorstep. We were in the middle of a humanitarian crisis. I was called by the Boston Globe, and they said, "What is your idea?" My idea was, we can help. We can be a part of the solution. We have the medical care, we have the housing, we have the food, we have the family reunification. My whole thing was to get them off of the street so that they can get the help that they needed. But I always began with, if the state or the city can do this, by all means, they should do it. But I refuse to just walk by people passing away, looking at an open air drug market, looking at human trafficking of women and young boys, while we could do something about it. That was our offer. It was turned down, and you haven't heard a peep out of us since about re-engaging it. So it wasn't about criminalization. It wasn't about making money because we were going to lose money, and it wasn't about increasing our head count, because that's not what it was about. It was about being the caretakers for these people, because that's our job, to help those in Suffolk County to do better for themselves.
Great, thank you. And Sandy, do you see a role that the Suffolk County Sheriff could play in alleviating the pain and suffering at Mass and Cass in the future?
Yes, I do. And interesting enough, that was one of the last proposals that I submitted before I left the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department. I had proposed that building that we're talking about is, we contracted with ICE, and that's where undocumented immigrants were holding. We had a contract, and that contract ended in 2019. What I had proposed was that we rent or contract or lease with the Department of Public Health or Mental Health and let them deal with the day-to-day services. Our officers are not trained in that capacity, nor is our staff. Furthermore, we do not even have the adequate staffing at the Sheriff's Department for the population currently in our care, which was aired on Channel 7 about 4 weeks ago, about the lack of staffing and officers being frozen or mandated to stay 3-4 times a week. So therefore, that was my recommendation. As sheriff, I'd like to propose that again. And furthermore, that facility would need to be constructed to be a rehabilitation center, because currently the door is still locked behind you. There are no toilets inside the units, and we do not have suicide prevention beds. But that was my proposal, and it was not received. And there was no justification why it wasn't received. I was just told, no, we're not going to do that. Thank you.
Great.
Hey, hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Can I rebut that, or do we not have an opportunity to rebut?
Do we have an opportunity? Yes, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, quickly. One, the buildings are owned by DCAM. We cannot rent out those facilities. Two, The doors do not lock behind individuals in this building. We were not going to lock the doors. And additionally, we were not going to have them in prison attire. They were going to be in khakis and polo shirts. 3, we do have the requisite mental health, substance abuse, and medical teams to have serviced that population.
Great.
May I speak? Thank you.
Yes, can we have a 30 seconds on the timer, please?
So there may be the adequate care now. There was not at the time because we did change the medical officials that we have now, the contractor, because they were not giving us the adequate amount of care that we needed when that proposal was presented. In addition, at the time, I have been going since January, those doors did lock behind you, and individuals can tell you that they are. Our officers are correctional officers, not mental health officials, and they should not be rendering that type of care. Thank you.
Great. Moving along to the next question.
I don't suppose I could rebut that, can I?
I'm sorry, I think we do have to move on to
Okay,
the
no
next
problem.
question, the consideration of
Sure.
time.
Okay, thank you.
Sandy, what current program would you eliminate and why?
Current program I would eliminate. I would need to get in there to assess the programs. Currently, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department has about 80 programs. What we're not doing is assessing all of them. And so I would need to see what we have and what we need to eliminate to figure out what's really working and what's actually giving our population the services, the support that they need so that they can be successful in the community. As I did say earlier, we do need to expand our programs. I know we do voter registration. According to the report that was put out, only 208 votes were casted by the population in a 5-year time period. So I'd like to expand that to make sure that we get more with their voices are being heard for the communities that they're coming back to. So that's how I would determine which ones that I'm going to eliminate. It's based on assessing them and implementing what needs to be done, and also expanding several of the programs such as Family Matters and such as the voter registration program. Thank you.
Great. Sheriff Tompkins, what programs that you initiated are you most proud of and why?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. Most of them, the Choice Program, where we send officers into schools, the Family Matters Program, where we work with families, the Peace Program, our OASIS Program, that's a substance abuse program. We have a wide array of programming, our educational programs, our immigration programs, our transgender and LGBTQ programs. We have gender-specific programs that are absolutely fantastic. And so we will continue to do those programs because we do them exceedingly well. And we do have a full-blown medical team. So officers do not act in the capacity of medical professionals. And so now the programs that we have, I think, are great. If you go to our website, www.scsdma.org, you can look up all of our programs. We have just released a 5-year program, a document that talks about everything that we do. And we have 20 pages that talks about data, how we evaluate the programs that are working and all of the initiatives that we've got underway that are going forward. And so we're extremely proud of the programming that we have.
Thank you. Just get the next questions. This question goes for Sheriff Tompkins. What policies and procedures are in place or should be in place to protect those in your care from sexual abuse or harassment by correction officers?
Well, years ago, you can hear me, yes? Just want to make sure.
Yes.
Hello? Yes, okay. Years ago, there was actually several laws passed that preclude officers from engaging intimately with the inmate population. Some have been terminated. Some have gone to jail, frankly. And so there are by law statutes in place that speak to the fact that these things cannot, should not, and will not happen. Whenever we find out that something like that has happened, not only do our internal investigation unit look into it, but the Boston Police and the District Attorney's Office looks into it also. And so we're quite holistic in making sure that these things that shouldn't happen don't happen. Does that mean that they haven't happened? There have been instances where these things have occurred, but we've been pretty quick to address those, correct those, and mete out the appropriate punishment for those. People that are in jail at their lowest point in their life, the last thing that they need is to be preyed upon by anybody, officers or other inmates. And so we work mightily to make sure that that doesn't happen. And we have a pretty darn good record of success that can speak to the fact that we are not going to tolerate those type of injustices.
Thank you. Sandy, you may go next.
Although there are laws in place that prevent this, our academy needs to implement some evidence-based training. I've been saying this from the beginning, we need evidence-based training within our academies. Individuals are coming in at the lowest points of their lives, although we do not arrest, we do not sentence. We are we see their primary care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's important that individuals are aware of their biases and understand some of the social injustice and inequities that have led for people to be in our care, custody, and control. So I would implement evidence-based implicit explicit bias training, and also I would implement CBT training within our academies, because places like California are also implementing that in their academies, and they're having success at that. Thank you.
Great. Next, we're moving to the lightning round. We are going to use, well, since Sheriff Tompkins is logging in via phone, we are going to verbalize our answers, yes or no. And once you verbalize your answers, we can move on to the next question. Did you hear that, Sheriff Tompkins? I know.
Yes, I have. Yep.
Okay, yes. So I'm just gonna ask questions and you guys are just responding yes or no. So we're gonna start with a 5-minute timer, and the questions are also in the chat. Okay, first question. Do you support ending cash bail?
Yes.
Yes.
Both candidates say yes. Will you do you approve of increasing the age at which someone is charged in juvenile court?
Yes.
Yes.
Both candidates say yes. Will you agree to repealing mandatory minimums?
Yes.
Yes.
Both candidates answer yes. Will you agree to repealing life without parole sentences?
Yes.
Yes.
Both candidates answer yes. Do you oppose the proposal to expand the state's wiretapping statute?
Yes.
Yes.
Both candidates answer yes. Are you in support of the Safe Communities Act, which limits states' cooperation with immigration and customs enforcement attacks on immigrants?
Can you ask that question again, please? Do we oppose it?
Are you in support of the Safe Community Acts?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Both, both answer yes. Are you in agreement in eliminating qualified immunity for law enforcement?
No.
Yes.
Sandy answers no. Sheriff Tompkins answers yes. Are you in agreement of banning the use of facial surveillance biometric technology by law enforcement?
Yes.
Yes.
Both candidates answer yes. Do you approve of the banning of no-knock warrants?
Yes.
Yes.
Both candidates answer yes. Do you agree in expunging all past nonviolent cannabis offenses?
Yes.
Yes.
Both candidates answer yes. Are you supporting a prison and jail construction moratorium?
Yes.
Wait, I'm sorry. Moratorium. Yes. Yes.
Supporting a prison and jail construction moratorium. Both candidates answer yes. Are you approving eliminating technical revocations of parole?
Yes.
Both candidates answer yes. Is there any opposition in the expansion of the state's pretrial detention statute?
I'm not sure I understand your question. I'm sorry.
So do you oppose expanding the state's pretrial detention statute? If anybody, if Steve or anybody wants to clarify the question.
Yeah. I need some clarity on the question before I can respond.
May I get some support in clarifying the question? I want to make sure that they answer the question promptly. Opposing an expansion of the state's pretrial detention statute.
Do we oppose it? I'm so sorry.
Yes.
I need a little more clarification. I'm so sorry.
I do too.
Can either Ed or Ziva jump in to clarify?
I think we can just go ahead and skip that one.
Okay. Great. Are you approving the broadening prosecutors' post-conviction powers to redress unjust conviction / extreme sentencing?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, both candidates answer yes. And again, thank you on behalf of JPP Progressives. We thank the both of you for participating in tonight's forum. And now Krista will close us out. Thank you for bearing with us.
All right. Again, thank you so much to all our candidates who came tonight. And thank you to Melissa and to Ziva for your work as our moderators. We appreciate your willingness to step up and take on that role. I am throwing some stuff in the chat just to remind everybody that we have a lot of things going on. We have ongoing canvassing for our already endorsed candidates happening on a regular basis. I've highlighted specifically the joint canvassing that we have been doing on Sunday afternoons for Sam Montano for state rep, Nika Eligardo for state senate, and Tanisha Sullivan for secretary of state, because then you get, more bang for your buck, as it were. You can support 3 of our candidates in one session. Additionally, we are holding another forum next week for the Attorney General's race. We are going to couple that forum with our usual community conversations, in which we will discuss, what we're going to do, our endorsements, RE endorsement, what our members want to say about what they have learned tonight and next week about these various races. And the link is there for you to sign up for that as well. It seems like we forgot to have our candidates do their closing statements. So if we can circle back, and Melissa, who should go first for closing statements? Should that be the sheriff or should that be?
Yes, let me see who went last. Oh, well, it was the lightning round. We can start with Sheriff Tompkins.
All right.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first off, I would love to thank JPP for having both Sandy and I talk about these very important issues and how we can help those that have been remanded to our care in custody. We have far too many of our citizens locked up in jails in this state and in this country. And you need practitioners that are going to work mightily to roll up their sleeves to correct that. I have a proven track record of innovation and leadership and collegiality with entities inside our facility and external partners. This is work that I love to do. I think it's very meaningful, and I think it's the price that we pay to be citizens on the planet. I would love to have your vote to continue this work. My name is Steve Tompkins, and I am the Suffolk County Sheriff. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Sandy. You may give your closing statement.
Well, I want to say thank you to JP Progressives for having this tonight, and thank you for everyone that's participated and watched this. Now more than ever, we need leaders that are present, proactive, and willing to use their voices to address crucial issues beyond their mandate. And there is power in the sheriff's voice. Not only will I speak on important issues, the policies I implement will reflect them. We also need to reimagine ways in which we can achieve greater job retention and morale among our custody and non-custody staff. I have a proven record within our community. I've always been present. I've always been active. So tonight I ask you for your support in supporting me in my candidacy for Suffolk County Sheriff. Thank you and have a nice evening. And please visit my website, sandyforsheriff.com.
Okay. Thanks very much to both candidates again for being with us tonight. I won't repeat all the stuff I said before. I just want to give a little bit of a plea. We're seeing a lot of folks having difficulty feeling motivated around races this year. We're not getting the number of volunteers that we usually do. And I want to be very clear that these things are really important. I understand like feeling a little burnt out, feeling a little downhearted, I guess, about politics in general. But that is all the more reason for you to come out and do some door knocking, do some phone banking, join us for some of the things we do and some of the candidates we support, because honestly, it's at the local level where we're really going to be able to make a difference and to use our voice and our time in a way that you can see direct results from. So I'll just, remind everybody that this is what we do. This is what why we have these endorsement discussions, why we go to the work of these forums, and we would be delighted to see everybody join us for any of our various things. If you are not already part of our mailing list, please do drop us a line, more info at jpprogressives.com, and we will be happy to sign you up. And that's it. Well, yeah, volunteer like it's 2018. Thank you, Andy. That's perfect. JP has a 2018 legacy to uphold in terms of supporting candidates. So we'll hope to see you all out hitting these streets sometime soon. And thanks very much for your time tonight.